afternoon, John.
Hi, Marty.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Another nice, hot, dry day here in Sacramento.
It's a bit warm here. I think it's 76,
Oh,
78. So I'm just getting steamy hot.
life is tough in San Diego.
San Diego. Yeah. So,
Hey, one of the things that we've been kicking around is essentially taking a look at group practice. As we say at the end of our podcast, we are hosting a accountability group practice here in Sacramento, which is now available on Zoom. We call it the Rusty Nail, because that's a story from one of our facilitators, Rodney, who talked about the two old geezers out in the country. The guy's walking by the one guy's place, and he sees this old basset hound sitting on the porch next to him, and he's letting out a groan. And he waves to him and heads on by, and then a few hours later he comes back, and the guy's still sitting there on the porch with the basset hound who's still moaning and groaning. And the guy says, what's wrong with your dog? Why is he groaning? He says, well, he's just sitting on a rusty nail. And the guy goes, well, why doesn't he just get up and get off of it? And he goes, well, I guess it just don't hurt enough yet.
yeah.
So the rusty nail is often a place where we all sit in our pain and misery and our self-victimization and self-pitying mode. So we call our group Rusty Nail, a little tongue-in-cheek there, to help anybody who wants to identify what that pain is and figure out how to support them getting up and off it if that's what they want to do. But
Yeah.
there's power in the group practice, and there are many group practices that people have come up with, especially since the 1960s and the human potential movement. We were talking earlier about Est and Werner Erhard and many of the offshoots of the work that he did starting in San Francisco in that period. You have Michael Murphy and Esalen and all the group stuff that was facilitated or still facilitated down at the Esalen Institute, Big Sur. So there are a lot of things that came out of that. You and I have both gone through some of those experiences. I went through Landmark, which was an offspring of Est, and I did that about 20 years ago. Went through their curriculum for living, as they call it. I believe that you had a similar experience, right?
Yeah, I went to a 4-day workshop called Impact, and they had a series of 3 workshops. First one was 4 days, Thursday through Sunday. Second one was the same. And then the third one was every other weekend, Saturday and Sunday, where we put into practice the experience that we had in the first 2. It was an amazing workshop, and some of the stuff that I use in intentional living came from that, and the essence words came from that. I am a gentle, loving, empowering whole man. That exercise came from that, and it was a significant workshop in my life. Although after a while, it wore off, and I found myself back into old behavior, and working on changing myself. And throughout my experience, my recovery experience, working in the jails, I got a chance to practice, to talk about, to dialogue, work with inmates who were struggling, and I came up with this intentional living process. And we talked about going to a workshop, getting all energized, and then leaving the workshop and not having any place to keep it going. And I find myself going back into old behavior. And one of the things we're working on is creating this intentional living weekly peer group accountability program, so that people have a place to come and stay in touch with the concepts, the experience, mostly the experience of this accountability.
Yeah, we like to call it a practice because practice makes perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And so we host 2 meetings a week here in Sacramento at 6:30 Pacific time, available on Zoom, and information on how to join if you want will be at the end of the podcast. So contact me and I'll be happy to send you the information. And we have facilitators. I facilitate one, and my colleague Rodney, who had the rusty nail story, facilitates the others. And we have facilitators because I'm going to talk about my experience, and maybe you could talk a little bit about the value of that individual. We have facilitators just because a lot of what we're doing, which even in Landmark was hinted at but didn't actually happen, at least I don't remember it happening, is piercing the veil of the consciousness into the subconsciousness. And we've discussed this before, but somewhere 7/8, 9/10, whatever, of our internal activity is in our subconscious, which is to say, it's happening right now in me, it's happening in you, but I'm not aware of it.
Right.
And that not only includes all the autonomic body functions that are going on, keeping my body in homeostasis, but also all of my memories, all of my emotions are all there right now in my subconscious. And
They are the sources, information sources for our behavioral decisions also.
Right. So all of it is why so much is there. And the conscious mind, of course, simply couldn't handle all of that at once, at least the way we're currently configured in our evolution. So we have to have some way of not paying attention to everything that's going on, or we might go kaplooey. So the facilitator in the accountability process, as you've designed it, and as I've learned it, is the person or persons who help us be aware of what's going on in our subconscious when, by definition, we're not aware of it.
Correct.
And we work a lot, for example, on projection, and a lot of what happens in a group meeting is that someone will bring something that upset her or him since the previous meeting, and is mystified as to why she or he is upset, is mystified as to why it might be a similar experience that the person had and said, I'm never going to do that again, and did it anyway.
Right.
Those recurring patterns. And so the facilitator essentially is a concrete version of the group consciousness. And for the moment, representing the group helps mirror back to the person who's doing the work what he or she might not be seeing about what instigated the behavior, instigated the emotion, instigated the criticism, the self-criticism, or the criticism of the other person, and then helps that person, once he or she's identified that with accuracy, helps that person create a new intention.
Right.
So we help lead people through the process.
And this is the reason for the leader is because we've been conditioned to, and we've been trained to work on the behavior. And the other significant thing is, through our experience, family of origin dysfunction, we have attached our identity to the behavior. So everybody thinks, well, just change the behavior and try to be good. Don't be bad. And that thought itself impacts the trauma that's motivating the behavior in the first place. And if you don't get into the truth, the awareness, the perception that you've developed throughout your experience, your life, the behavior doesn't change. You can want to change, and this is my experience. I watched myself do things that I said, I don't want to do those anymore. And I would be adamant and committed not to do those things, like yell at somebody or demean somebody. And 2.5 minutes after I had made that commitment, something would happen in my environment where I'd find myself in that old behavior. So what I understand is that behavior was simply in alignment with the information in my subconscious. Family of origin dysfunction, trauma created a perception that alerted me that this behavior kept me safe. And if I do not get into this subconscious pool of information and ferret it out and get to the truth of what I'm holding out of my consciousness, it's like I don't even know I have it. The behavior doesn't change, or it'll change for a short period of time and then gravitate back towards the old behavior. This process that we have in having a weekly meeting where people refresh this information, pretty soon the subconscious pool of information has been reframed, and the behavior is always in alignment with the information you have, your perception, your belief system, attitudes, habits, and expectations. It's in alignment with that trauma. When I heal the trauma, I shift my motivating information for my behavior, and I find myself automatically doing things differently, and it's still in alignment with the subconscious pool of information.
So what you're saying is that, what I heard you say is that awareness of this information gives me the potential to reframe it or renew it or transform it based on new information that I plant into my subconscious.
Yes.
In reaction to this awareness that I didn't have before. And
yes.
and then coaching from the facilitator to help me remember that recognizing this truth is an opportunity for that change, that I couldn't change it until I recognized it, until I owned it somehow at an emotional level. And then in that emotional energy, that emotional charge, I am in a creative state also, where I can now create something else through my verbal intention, my stating the new data, the new information, the new desire, and then putting it in the form of an intention.
And one of the things that I understand is that we are and always have been in a creative space. And what's being created is the total sum of our experience turned into a belief system, attitudes, perception. And I was at West Sac, and hold on a second, darn. And in the church, the minister said something that caught my attention. She said, there's only one thing you cannot not do. And that got my attention. And she said, manifest. And that put together, solidified something I already knew, is that we're creative beings. We create out of our experience and intent. If the intent is in our subconscious, which is directed for us to watch out for other people because they'll hurt you, and you have to be vigilant about their motives, I become suspicious of other people. That is in alignment with the experience I had. So I'm creating my reality, I'm creating relationships, I'm creating things in my life, and it's being filtered through this need to be vigilant, or in the recovery field, we call it hypervigilant. And this hypervigilance is not wrong. It's in alignment with the trauma, and it creates a reality in alignment with that. So we've always created, and so it's not about creating what we want. We're always creating what we want. It's about using my conscious mind to direct my subconscious mind. Now that's a bit, the only way to change the subconscious, because our memory is held in the form of a frequency, an emotional vibration. It's held in our subconscious memory. For that to shift or change necessarily means I need an emotion equal to or greater than this trauma. And if I can't get to that emotional frequency or feeling, body feeling, the trauma will always trump the intellect. This process puts us in an emotional awareness. And when I say that, it's not so much knowing details, just the hit of me owning that I'm mean, and specifically to my children. I'm mean to my children. That raises my awareness, which is a frequency specifically focused on children and my relationship to them. And when I own I'm a mean dad, this frequency happens, and then I can feel that hurt, disappointment, devastation. I can feel the damage done to my children, and then I say to myself, it is my intent to be a loving, caring, nurturing father, and that frequency fuses with that trauma. I'm a bad dad, or I'm a mean dad, and shifts and re-implants into my subconscious this new information, this new frequency. When that happened, I found myself presenting differently to my children. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how to do it. I simply found myself presenting differently to my children with a different attitude, awareness that I linked to this, I'm a mean dad. Wow, that hurts. It is my intent to be a loving, caring, nurturing father. And my behavior automatically changed. It's like a reboot, reset. The motherboard now has this information, and the directive comes from this. I don't have to figure out how to be a kind father. I just started being a kind father. So,
one of the things that I'd like to emphasize to the person listening to this for the first time is that in my experience, this is a cumulative process. I would love to say that all I got to do is one time do what you just said, and then everything changes permanently. But the truth is that that neural network, that emotional frequency pattern that you spoke of, is actually hardwired into my brain. So there's a physical analog to this mental picturing, and that is flavored by emotional defense. And so, in a certain way, from a physiological perspective, I'm working on rewiring my brain to support the new intention.
yes.
So the power, for me, the power of iteratively working in a group process is twofold. Number one, I'm surrounded by people who are exuding that positive emotional energy, in the field, because none of them has my charge, none of them has my subconscious neural wiring frequency. They have theirs, but when I'm working, most of those people are not triggered by what I'm doing. So they can sit in almost a divine witnessing kind of attitude, and that creates a field of healing and love, compassion, which is the frequency that I want to bring to bear on my work. And then secondly, because even after I have my first breakthrough, my first aha, and I set my new intention, I may still do it again, which is why on the accountability tree diagram, we have at the bottom and repeat.
Right.
Go back and start over again, because it took me 60 odd years to consolidate the pattern that I'm working on shifting. And that's a lot of reinforcement over decades. And so to undo all of that in one fell swoop is unlikely. I wouldn't say it's impossible, because all things are possible. But for most of us, so just speak for me, I need and continue to need to work and deepening my awareness of these internal processes, come to love them rather than resist them. These are my teachers, as much as sometimes that feeling of shame that I get when I do my equivalent of I'm a bad dad, when I look at the ways I've been cruel to people, I've been cruel to myself, I look at the ways I've pushed people away who just wanted to love me and be with me and enjoy me. That brings up a lot of shame and self-criticism. So I've now worked at this long enough to recognize those responses as an opportunity to do the reset. Okay, what do I want? What do I want in this moment?
Yes.
And so that over time, that process that you identify of bringing this new emotional frequency to match or exceed the earlier one, verbalizing it as an intent, and then letting it do its work in the subconscious actually does create shift.
Yeah. When I'm, I thought about a lot of different things when you were talking, and my practice is to listen to you all the way through, and then say what's there for me then. So there's two things I want to say. One, I want to give an example with my grandson, and then talk about spiritual teachings, sacred texts. They all ask us to create a pattern, to create a practice, either to meditate or pray in the morning, or they encourage us to have a practice to stay focused consciously, to stay mindful, and be in that conscious part of ourselves and learn discernment. So the practices that have been taught for the last, let's just say 2,000 years, however they're interpreted, I want to offer, haven't worked for the majority of people. There are people who attain a certain degree of calmness, serenity, and go through their lives in meaningful ways. For the majority of people, there's something missing. And I get that, using myself as an example, I misinterpreted that because it filtered through my childhood trauma, and my conclusion was, well, that's not me, I'll never be any good. And that was the message from the subconscious. So this practice, I go right into that subconscious and name it. I don't resist it, I don't blame it, I don't judge it, I'm not in my critical mind. When I remember saying I'm a mean father, I was simply in the moment with that truth, with the result of where I found myself based on my experience family of origin trauma. And that truth, no blame, no judgment, I was able to consciously bring in, after the feeling of the truth, it is my intent to be a loving, caring, nurturing father, and went back down. And I simply found myself in a different place, a different awareness, a different perspective with my children. The other thing is, with my grandson, he's 4.5, and I told the story the last time about him telling me to go. He didn't want me there. He was screaming. He was upset. So I mirrored to him, I see that you're frustrated. I see that you're, and he was experiencing his, what I want to call anger at the unfairness of, I'm there, not his mom. And I told him when he calmed a little bit that I said, Solomon, I want you to know that I love you so much. And what I believe happened is that trauma, the frequency of I'm angry, was met with nurturing and love, so he can experience himself to be angry and not suffer consequences of abandonment or ridicule or being reframed, so that he can, when he gets angry, express it as an adult and know that he's going to be safe. Most people, now let's just stay with myself. When I got angry, people got hurt. And I had that anger.
You mean as an adult?
As an adult. So I had anger, the emotion of anger, mixed up with violent behavior. So I named the behavior anger because I wasn't allowed to experience anger. I didn't know what it was. Everybody says that when you're yelling and screaming, you're angry. Well, I've come to find out that when I'm yelling and screaming at somebody, I'm afraid. And it's coming from someplace I don't even know where it's at. And for a grown 6 foot, 250-pound man to say, oh, I'm afraid of you, was not something that I was trained to do. So I lashed out, I attacked, or I left, I withdrew. Because I wasn't able to experience, this is not working for me, that hurt, please don't do that to me, and express what I need. My grandson will be able to do that. And I'm going to be able to, he's already doing it. Without him being ridiculed, blamed, or punished, it's not trauma anymore. It's been relieved in the moment in our relationship. And that's what we're doing in the group. We're re-experiencing our childhood and not being judged or blamed. We re-experience that in the accountability tree process. We re-experience that in owning my projections. If I think somebody is an asshole, and then the facilitator says, well, would you be willing to consider that you're projecting, there's something inside you that's holding that energy on you? And I go, oh, I'm an asshole. I'm mean. And there's this resonance that happens because it validates that trauma. It says, yeah, that hurt. And it's still in the subconscious realm. And then I get to create an intent. It is my intent to be kind. It is my intent to be flexible. It is my intent to be loving and nurturing. It is my intent to love myself. And that slowly, incrementally changes the whole pool of information. And this is key. I automatically present differently. And without getting into that truth, into that trauma, there's a coding of affirmation of I feel good in this moment, and it doesn't penetrate into the pain. and transform the pain. It just covers it up for a moment. And then I find myself over a period of time in the old behavior, because the subconscious is a powerful, creative force, focus. This is, I know we're talking about this over and over, but it is, in my mind, so simple and yet counterintuitive. And, you know, you and I can talk about this 10 podcasts. And when somebody experiences themselves in this process, that's when they like, oh, I see what you're saying. And not that somebody might get it from this conversation, that's why we're having the conversation, or become curious about it, or stumble onto it themselves, because that's how I got it. I stumbled onto all this stuff. It's the experience of being in a loving, nurturing situation, atmosphere, and not being humiliated, ridiculed, and blamed.
You'd said something that I want to explore a little bit more, because I think it's a powerful insight. You were describing Solomon's experience when you mirror back to him, I see you're angry, I see you're upset, I see you're frustrated. And you said that trauma will not occur in that instance because the emotions, now my words, because the emotions have been given the opportunity to complete themselves naturally.
Yes, absolutely.
Because emotion is just an electrochemical energy surge in my body, and it always comes to an end because it's going to be replaced by something else. But it's always, it's like the tides. It goes back and forth, but it never stays the same. So the implication then, if I am understanding you correctly, is that trauma is in essence any emotion that's been stymied from completing its natural flow.
Yes.
And that if my emotion's been stymied, then essentially there's a compression of some kind that now inhabits my body somewhere in the form of some kind of, now I'm going to use this word, blockage or obstruction that is now, so rather than the emotion just flowing out, it's now kind of caught.
Right.
Like a genie in a bottle or something.
Right.
And I can tell you, I have direct experience of that because I have Crohn's disease, and Crohn's disease is a chronic autoimmune syndrome which causes the intestines to inflame and to prevent food from going through. And I first experienced that when I was 19, and my teenage years were extremely traumatic, and I was aware of experiences of stuffing my feelings, such that it never occurred to me as I was going through those emotional teenage, adolescent heartbreak, and I was going through knowing that I was gay and couldn't tell that to anybody, so I stuffed all of that, and it's no wonder it erupted physically in my guts.
Great.
But I had no understanding that so powerful is trauma that it's not merely, in my case, it wasn't merely mental, psychic, or emotional, it was also simultaneously physical.
Yes.
And I remember speaking to a specialist, and he said to me, is there anything particular in your life that's causing you to be upset? And I knew in that moment I could not tell him the truth. It's almost like what you said, you know, I couldn't tell anybody, well, I'm afraid of you.
Right.
So I recognized, I had an intuitional hit that he was onto something, and that it was better to have this disease than to tell the truth.
Yes.
And I think that's an analog of how it is for us. That's the rusty nail. It's better to get Crohn's disease and go in the hospital and have your bowels cut open and re-sewn together than to admit that there's trauma in my life that is shameful embarrassing, and presumably unfixable.
And you're talking about this now with an awareness of all the work you've done since.
Correct.
And I want to offer my experience of what happens to me in that moment. There's a hit, there's awareness, there's a peek at, and this mechanism has a way of safeguarding itself. So it doesn't allow me to process that, because it believes that if you do tell the truth, you will die. And Crohn's disease, the fact that it's eating you up inside, this mechanism isn't concerned, it's not personal, it's not concerned with your health, it's concerned with keeping you safe. So you survived your teen years, okay, we'll do that again because you survived. And then you think, well, maybe I need to look, and then something distracts you, or it just goes away, because that's the power of the subconscious to safeguard itself. It uses the intelligent mind to put you in situations where this gets reinforced.
Right.
So the other thing is, when the emotion is released, see, Solomon was able to release
Right.
that anger, sense of unfairness, of loss, of desire to see his mom. He was able to release that in a healthy way. If I had said to him, you're being a bad little boy, you're going to stay in your room until you stop this and you'll be happy. Well, he would have like figured out a way to take that sense of injustice and keep it stuffed in. An example I want to use now that most people can relate to is, if a guy comes back from a war zone and he's walking down the street and a car backfires and he hits the ground, he just goes flat on the ground. That's what we're talking about. And that is not only with noises, with the nuances of relationships. This mechanism is alerted and then puts you in the behavior it believes you're going to survive. For a combat veteran, it's flat on the ground. For me, it's love equals rejection. If somebody pays me a compliment, I do everything I can to avoid the compliment, instead of just saying, oh, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, and you're right. That's what I do. That's who I am. I couldn't do that. And that's not like a backfire or bomb going off in front of me. It was, like you said, accumulation of trauma that was over and over and over in the same way, which created this knee-jerk reaction on my part, or proclivity to avoid conflict, or to not be able to hear a compliment. And it was a visceral reaction to something that didn't have that intensity. And it's designed to keep us safe.
Well, I was going to say that the psychic mechanism is the same regardless of the intensity of the specific incident. It's what's amazing to me, even after doing this work for all these years, is there's still hair trigger responses to certain situations that are easily identified as childhood trauma responses.
Yeah,
because they're not at all related to what's actually going on in front of me.
right.
But
the
power.
I want to offer, Marty, it's easy for us.
No, it's not.
Well, it's recognizable for us. Before I got into recovery, I had no idea any of this was going on.
Exactly.
It was not even in my awareness that I could even unravel it. And there was nothing to unravel. I just had to find a partner that was good enough and was the right partner, and wasn't, you know, crazy and demanding. And that's what's insidious about this, and us talking about this is that I went through my whole life without any awareness that any of this was going on. So booze worked well for me, violence worked well, yelling and screaming worked well for me, looking for people trying to backstab me or make fun of me or ridicule me, and then me making sure nobody ever does that to me, or lying to me. That was a big one. And I had no idea that my intensity around the lie was internal, because I gave myself up, which is the biggest lie. I complied. I said, yeah, I'm okay, when I was furious, and I lied to myself. So when I project liar out onto somebody else, or somebody lies to me, I have immense energy around that. And yet it's internal. It's in me. It's not out there. It's not in them. People lie to me now, and I go, well, that guy just lied to me. Okay, I'll just note that and move on. It's like, or ask them, depending on the situation or the relationship, the level of a relationship, I have a way to respond to that. I don't cut them out of my life. I don't like, oh my God, what's wrong with this person? It's an evil person. I'm able to stay in my life at the level that my life is coming to me. I have discernment and peace because of all the internal work that I've done.
Well, I want to offer that there's besides this process being iterative, like I said a few minutes ago, it's also it's a community process.
Mm-hmm.
In Adult Journal of Alcoholics, they say that, and I think also in AA, they say that, you know, alcoholism is a family disease.
Yeah.
And the trauma that I received as a child was a social process. It wasn't my process. It's a process that occurred within a social unit called the family, the culture, the church community that I was part of, the school I went to, all of those things. It was the social conditioning. And so, much to my surprise, although it makes logical sense once you think about it, it's the healing is better effectuated in a social context. And again, what we're talking about here is the group. In some of our New Thought churches, as you know, I'm a speaker at the local Unity Church here. We seek to call upon that group energy in our healing work, in our prayer work. Even scripturally, in the Christian tradition, there's a notion of Jesus says, where two or more are gathered in my name, I am, which we interpret to mean the consciousness of the Christ, the divine, is now present as awareness and not just as subconscious or intuitional potential, but the actual embodied experience that I'm having is divine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my experience in the group when I'm having an authentic emotional recognition of a truth about myself, that particularly one I've been hiding from for years and years and years. That moment when I just let go of my defenses and I'm willing to own this truth. It's difficult to convey to somebody who hasn't been through this the flood of relief and joy.
Yeah.
And it's like my body goes, free at last.
Yes. And that thing that you were so, and not sometimes not even consciously, but wanting nobody to ever find out about you, because then you would be, whatever happened to you as a child, that would happen to you again. And then when you finally say it, and people are going, yeah, I did that too. Yeah, thank you, John, for saying that. Or I'm glad you said that, because that's just like me too. It's like this, where did these people come from? It's like, are you kidding me? And that relief is just, you feel it leaving your body.
Yep.
It's amazing. Yes.
Yep. And I just want to again reiterate that my experience is it leaves my body, and now I can create a new intention, but it hasn't disappeared forever.
Right.
And that, again, I think it's a brilliant insight that you shared with us, which is that this mechanism is designed to keep me safe. And to paraphrase your minister from your church, and it's always going to be working to keep me safe.
Yes.
And it has no option but to work and keep me safe. That's the impersonal nature of it. It's like it's like when I press the accelerator of my car, gas goes into the combustion chamber. It's just its function. It's what it does.
Yes.
It doesn't consider where you're going with the car, whether you're going to use it to cross state lines for moral purposes. It's just doing what it's designed to do.
Yes. Yeah.
So when my defense mechanism is doing its work, again, part of what I've learned is to honor it instead of fighting it. Because we have this, we have another one of our sayings that what we resist persists. So whatever I fight in myself about myself is just going to draw energy from that fight, and it's going to double down. And so when I'm willing to go, oh, that's okay, I give myself permission to call myself a jerk or whatever's going on. Almost the same kind of relief flows. It's like I'm letting myself off this hook for this moment. And in that relief, regardless of whether it's a huge relief or a minor relief, there's this new energy, again, that is eager to hear a new intention and willing to work with that. Because I think in the long run, what we're doing at a fundamental level is we're creating a whole different environment of safety for ourselves. It's my intention to feel safe in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I don't know how that happens. Like you were saying earlier, it's like just we have access to divine wisdom somehow in ways that don't logically aren't reducible to a logical proposition. But experientially, I can tell you that's there.
Yeah. We talked a bit about the difference between our conscious mind and our subconscious mind, and the role of the conscious mind, and that's to once I understand the truth where I find myself based on my experience, I get to discern, think about, contemplate what I want that's different than that. And not so much the opposite of it, because sometimes it is the opposite. I'm mean, I want to be kind. There was certain times where I owned something around this, my proclivity for violence and meanness. And what came to me is, it is my intent to forgive myself. And those intents are hooked in with our essence. When I'm in this flow, this no blame, no judgment alignment, and seeing the alignment and feeling the pain of the alignment of dysfunction and trauma, that's where inspiration comes from. One of the things I write on the board is heart signals, body signals, head signals. And the heart signals are emotions, what we classify as emotions. The body signals are sensations or feelings. And then the head signals are our thoughts. And we have these three, and we rely on our thoughts. We dismiss the emotion and feeling body. And when we realign, that's what the goal of this whole process is, to realign our emotional and feeling body. It feeds to our rational brain inspiration. it's that peace beyond, or that knowingness beyond that. I mean, for me to own I'm mean and then realize I want forgiveness, is my intent to forgive myself, is counterintuitive. Where did that come from? How did it form in that way? Well, that's the essence of who we are. That's melding the conscious mind with the realization of what's in the subconscious mind, and then consciously changing it. And that's where on that chart I have on either side of truth, emotion, I intend, power, and choice. And without the emotional and feeling body, the best we can come up with intellectually is clever. We're very clever. When we attach the emotion and feeling body, that's what intelligence is. That's where inspiration comes from. That's where things that come out of the ethers, and we have this realization, oh my God, I'm part of the whole, or oh my God, I'm in this bliss place. And our goal in this accountability process is simply to start the process of realigning with our emotional feeling body. And then it's my experience that I have this knowingness that leads me, pulls me to more expansion, more possibility, more genuineness. I want more. I have a lot. I am blessed. And Marty, I want more. I want it all. Whatever it is, I want it all. And I'm going to continue this practice because I use this practice in my daily life. I'm not do this because you'll be better like me. It's like, no, do this and you will come to a life you never knew possible. And that's true from where I am now. I'm coming to a life I'm not capable of understanding now through this process of realigning my emotional body, feeling body that feeds inspiration to my rational brain, my conscious mind.
The good news is you can have more.
Yeah, I intend to have it all.
The good news is there's no limit.
Yes.
So from a different perspective, you could say, well, you already have everything.
Yeah.
In this moment and now in the next moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the only limitation is that developmental belief mechanism that was created to support limitation, to support separation, to keep us safe.
Yes.
And now, through conscious awareness, through this intuitional awareness, we have the capacity, I have the capacity to believe now that my safety lies in being in communion with all of it.
Yes.
That my safety, that I'm not safe when I'm separate. I'm no longer safe when I'm separate.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and again, that's why the group process is so powerful, because the group represents in microcosm the whole world.
Yes.
So I can practice in a group how I want to be in all of my life, and not just the hour or two that I'm in a group. So it's a laboratory. The group's a laboratory. Our rusty nail meetings are laboratories for people to come and just test it out. Test their insights, test their fears, test their resistances. Just test it all out.
Yeah.
The container is fairly invariant, which is to say, it's full. It's created by the consciousness of all of those who are there, intending to create safety, love, and joy, so that everyone, regardless of how wounded he or she believes him or herself to be, can practice vulnerability.
Yes.
Which is the practice of intimacy.
Yeah. Yeah. I got distracted by that choo-choo noise on my phone. I forgot to turn my phone on. Dang. Anyway.
Well, we're coming to the end of the hour, and before I ask you for closing thoughts, it occurred to me that I would like to offer the opportunity for people who are listening to this. If there's something you'd like John to comment on or talk about, shoot him or me a note. Our email addresses are at the end of the podcast, how to get in touch with John or with me. And please let us know. Is there something that you'd like John to explore more deeply? Is there a topic that you would like us to discuss? We'd love to respond to any requests. So,
and I'd like to add, Marty, if you have a question, just type out the question.
Right.
Any question, and we'll respond. I'll respond the best way I know how. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So we'd like to hear from you. So please feel free. And also, as we say, as I said at the top of the podcast, if you'd like to participate in our accountability group practice meetings, which we call the Rusty Nail Club, contact me and I'll be happy to send you the Zoom meeting information. We meet Monday nights and Thursday nights from 6:30 to 8:30 Pacific time. And we do have some people that participate from the Midwest. And so and actually we've had somebody from Latin America show up. So we're an international meeting.
That's very cool. Yeah, that's cool.
So final thoughts, John, about this wonderful topic we've been exploring today.
I'm grateful for the information that I've been graced with, and I was told in this 12 Steps and another book I read, which is A Course in Miracles, that whatever you want to keep, give it away. And it is my intent to give this to as many people as possible in the shortest amount of time. That's it.
All right. Well, I certainly have received it from you, John. I'm grateful.
Thank you.
And I love giving it away too.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Well, have a great weekend. Say hi to Solomon for all of us. And
I will.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, Marty.
Right,
yeah.
thanks.
See you next week.